The mysterious stranger. Jake had been traveling through space for weeks. His ship was running low on fuel, and his supplies were nearly finished. He needed to find a planet with resources soon. Otherwise, he would not survive. As he scanned the nearest solar system, his computer detected a small rocky planet. The atmosphere was thin but breathable. There were no clear signs of life. It was not an ideal place, but he had no other choice. With a deep sigh, he adjusted his ship's controls and prepared for landing. The moment he stepped onto the planet's surface, he knew something was wrong. The air smelled stale, the sky was covered in dark clouds, and the ground was cracked and dry. No plants, no water, no signs of life. It looked like a place that had been abandoned long ago. Jake tightened his grip on his bag. He had only one ration bar left. He would need to find food and water soon, but the planet did not seem promising. Still, he walked forward, scanning the area with his helmet's sensors. Nothing. Just dead land and silence. As he moved through the ruins of what seemed to be an old city, he felt a strange sensation, a feeling that someone was watching him. He turned quickly, but there was nothing behind him, just the empty, lifeless buildings. Shaking his head, he continued walking. After an hour of searching, he found a small shelter. It looked like an abandoned marketplace. The broken stalls were covered in dust, and the ground was littered with strange symbols. Jake did not understand their meaning, but they looked ancient. He sat on a stone, pulling out his last ration bar. It wasn't much, but it would keep him alive for a little longer. He unwrapped the bar and took a small bite, chewing slowly. Then he heard it. A weak, broken sound. A cry. Jake froze, his heart pounding. He turned his head slowly, scanning the area. The sound came again. A soft whimper, like someone trying not to be heard. He stood up, holding his ration bar in one hand and his small plasma knife in the other. "Hello," he called out. Silence. For a moment, he thought he had imagined it. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe the loneliness was playing tricks on his mind. Then something moved in the shadows. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he saw a figure stumble forward. It was an alien, thin, trembling, and barely able to stand. Its skin was pale gray, stretched tightly over its bones. Its eyes were sunken, glowing dimly in the darkness. The alien took one shaky step forward, then another. Its legs gave out, and it collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily. Jake's instincts screamed at him to back away, but something stopped him. The alien was not attacking him. It was not dangerous. It was weak, starving. Its bony fingers twitched as it tried to lift itself, but it had no strength left. And then, to Jake's shock, it began to cry, soft, broken sobs of pure desperation. For a moment, Jake just stood there, unsure of what to do. He had never seen an alien cry before. He had met hostile aliens. He had fought against raiders in deep space. But this was different. The alien lifted its head, and its glowing eyes locked onto the ration bar in Jake's hand. Jake looked down at the bar, then back at the alien. It was starving. If he didn't help, it would die. But this was his last meal. His stomach growled, reminding him that he needed food too. He had no idea what this creature was, or if it would be a threat once it got its strength back. Still, something inside him told him what he needed to do. Without a word, Jake knelt down and slowly extended the ration bar toward the alien. The creature flinched at first, as if expecting pain instead of kindness. Then, its eyes widened in shock. It looked at Jake, then at the food, as if it couldn't believe what was happening. Finally, with shaking hands, it reached out and took the food. The moment it touched the bar, strange symbols on its skin began to glow faintly. Jake watched in silent amazement as the alien hesitated for only a second before devouring the food in desperate, hungry bites. As it ate, its breathing steadied, and its trembling slowed. Then suddenly, the air around them shifted. Jake felt it, an unnatural stillness, as if the planet itself had noticed what had just happened. The dark clouds above them swirled. A distant rumbling echoed across the ruins. The alien's eyes widened in horror. It lifted its head and whispered, in a voice so weak it was almost lost in the wind. "They are coming." Jake's stomach dropped. "Who?" he asked. The alien tried to stand, grabbing Jake's arm for support. Its grip was weak but urgent. They smell kindness," it gasped. "And they hate it." Before Jake could ask anything else, the ground trembled beneath them. Something was coming. Something dangerous. And it was coming fast. An act of kindness sparks fear. Jake's hands were still outstretched, fingers tingling from the alien's weak grip. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on him. He had given away his last meal. The alien, still hunched on the cracked ground, licked the last crumbs from its trembling fingers. Its body, though frail, seemed to be changing. The strange glowing symbols on its skin pulsed softly, as if waking up after a long slumber. Then it spoke again, its voice barely above a whisper. "They are coming." Jake's pulse quickened. His mind scrambled for answers. "Who?" he demanded. The alien turned its hollow eyes toward him, and in that moment, Jake saw raw fear. "They smell kindness," the alien rasped. "And they hate it." A sharp gust of wind cut through the ruins. The air, once still and lifeless, now carried a strange electric charge, as if the entire planet had been stirred awake by Jake's simple act of generosity. Then he heard it. A low, distant growl. Jake's training kicked in. His body tensed as he scanned the horizon. Nothing. Just the endless ruins and swirling dust. But the alien wasn't looking toward the distance. It was looking up. Jake followed its gaze, and his breath caught in his throat. From the blackened clouds above, shadows moved, long, twisted forms writhing against the storm. The sky itself seemed to churn, as if something ancient and unseen had turned its attention toward them. The alien grabbed Jake's arm, its grip suddenly much stronger than before. "We have to run." Jake didn't argue. He pulled the alien up, and together they stumbled away from the ruins, their feet kicking up dust. Behind them, the growl deepened. It was no longer just one sound. It was many. And it was getting closer. The alien's breathing was ragged, but its pace quickened. Jake could feel its panic spreading to him. But he didn't even know what they were running from. "What are they?" he shouted over the rising wind. The alien shook its head. "Punishers," it gasped. "They hunt kindness. They destroy those who show it." Jake's stomach twisted. This didn't make sense. How could something be hunting kindness? Then the first shape emerged from the swirling storm. It was tall, too tall, with shifting, oily skin that bled into the darkness around it. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth. But somehow, Jake could feel its gaze pressing against him, heavy and full of something unnatural. Hate. Pure, relentless hate. The alien collapsed again, gripping its head in pain. Its glowing symbols flared bright, and the creature let out a shriek as if something was tearing into its mind. Jake had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear. They weren't going to outrun this thing. They had to hide. He spotted an opening between two collapsed structures, a tight, jagged gap barely big enough for them to squeeze through. Without hesitation, he grabbed the alien and dragged it inside just as the creature behind them let out a terrible, ear-splitting roar. Jake pressed himself against the cold stone, forcing his breath to slow. The alien trembled beside him, its glowing symbols flickering like a dying flame. Outside, the Punisher stopped. It stood at the entrance, its shifting body writhing like smoke and shadow. Its head tilted slightly, as if listening. Jake clenched his fists, willing himself not to move. Seconds crawled by. The Punisher didn't enter. It didn't speak. It simply stood there, its faceless form absorbing the darkness around it. Then, without warning, It turned away. But Jake didn't feel relief. Because more were coming. The alien, still shaking, grabbed Jake's wrist. Its voice was barely audible, full of desperation and guilt. "This is my fault," it whispered. "I should have died before I let you feed me." Jake's eyes narrowed. He didn't understand everything yet, but one thing was certain. The moment he had shared his food, he had broken some unseen law of this planet. And now, they were both being hunted for it. "Look, I thought I was saving a starving stranger. I didn't know I was inviting death to follow us." Hunted. The silence was worse than the noise. Jake held his breath, pressing his back against the cold stone. His heart pounded so hard, he swore the creatures outside it could hear. The Punishers were waiting. He could sense them just beyond the ruins, watching, listening, waiting for a sign of weakness. Shadows flickered through the narrow gap in the stone, shifting like liquid smoke. Their presence was unnatural, their movements slow, deliberate. They weren't in a hurry. Because they knew. They always caught their prey. The alien beside him trembled violently. The glowing symbols on its skin pulsed like a weak heartbeat, flickering with every uneven breath. It was getting worse. Jake turned his head slightly. "What's happening to you?" he whispered. The alien's breathing hitched. "They are inside my mind," it rasped. "Punishers do not kill with claws or teeth. They kill with despair." Jake stiffened. "What does that mean?" The alien turned its hollow eyes toward him, and for the first time, Jake saw hopelessness in them. "They feed on regret, on doubt, on pain." It swallowed hard. "The more I feel, the stronger they get." Jake's stomach twisted. He glanced back toward the entrance, where the shadows still slithered just beyond reach. He wasn't sure if the creatures had eyes, but somehow he could feel their focus shifting toward him now. A cold whisper slid through his thoughts. "It was your last meal. You gave it away. You'll starve." Jake's breath caught in his throat. The whisper wasn't real. It was them. They weren't just hunting him. They were inside him, pulling at his fears, his regrets, his doubts. They weren't chasing with speed. They were waiting for him to break. Jake clenched his fists, forcing himself to push back the thoughts. "Not today," he muttered under his breath. The alien, however, wasn't fighting. Its body shuddered as if something was crushing it from the inside. The glowing marks dimmed further. Jake grabbed its arm. "Listen to me. You have to fight back." The alien barely reacted. Its head tilted forward, shoulders slumped. "I cannot," it whispered. "I have been running for too long." Jake shook his head. He didn't understand everything about this world, but he knew one thing. He wasn't about to let someone die after he saved them. He tightened his grip on the alien's arm. "Then run with me one more time." The alien hesitated. The doubt in its eyes wavered, but the crushing weight of despair still pressed down. Jake wasn't going to wait any longer. He moved. With one sharp motion, he pulled the alien up and bolted from the hiding place. The moment they stepped into the open, the Punishers turned in unison. The shadows shivered with hunger. Then they attacked. The ground shook as the creatures lunged, moving like smoke but hitting like a storm. Jake grabbed the alien's wrist and ran faster than he had ever run before. Ruins crumbled around them. The sky howled with unnatural screams. The wind itself seemed to push them back, as if the planet wanted them to fall. But Jake didn't stop. The alien stumbled behind him, legs weak but moving. "Where?" it gasped. "Anywhere but here," Jake shouted. Then he saw it, a dark opening in the distance, a deep underground passage, barely visible between the cracked ruins. If they could make it inside. A violent force slammed into Jake's back. He crashed to the ground, his vision flashing white with pain. The alien collapsed beside him, groaning. The shadows wrapped around Jake's arms, burning cold. It wasn't fire, but something worse, a deep, sinking emptiness, as if his very existence was being unraveled. The whispers flooded his mind again. You should have let it die. You will die because of it. You were foolish. Jake gritted his teeth. No. Pain lanced through his skull. He tried to move, but the weight was unbearable. Then, beside him, the alien screamed. The sound was raw, broken, filled with agony, guilt, and fear. The symbols on its skin flickered weakly, but Jake saw it, a spark of light, buried beneath the pain. Something inside him clicked. This was what the Punishers wanted. Not blood. Not death. Hopelessness. The moment the alien stopped fighting, the moment Jake gave in, they would win. Jake forced his body to move, inch by inch, against the crushing weight of despair. He reached out, not for a weapon, not for an escape, but for the alien's hand. His fingers brushed the alien's wrist, and a sudden warmth ignited between them. The glowing symbols flared bright, not weak and flickering, but blazing like fire. The alien's eyes snapped open. Jake didn't understand what had just happened, but the Punishers recoiled as if burned. The crushing weight lifted slightly. Jake gasped for air. Whatever that was, do it again. The alien looked down at its hands. The symbols were still glowing, but now, instead of flickering, they were spreading. It wasn't just energy. It was resistance. The alien's eyes sharpened. For the first time since Jake had found it, its expression wasn't fear. It was determination. Together, they staggered toward the underground passage, fighting against the shadows clawing at their backs. The darkness howled, but it did not follow them inside. Jake collapsed against the rough stone wall, panting. The alien slid down beside him, breathing heavily. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the alien turned to him, voice hoarse but steady. You do not understand what you have done. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. That makes two of us. The alien hesitated, then looked down at its still glowing skin. My people believed kindness was weakness. That is why we fell. It lifted its hand, staring at the symbols pulsing beneath its skin. But your kindness, it changed something. Jake exhaled slowly, letting his head rest against the cold wall. Whatever had happened just now, it wasn't over. They had escaped, but something had awoken, and the Punishers would not stop until they crushed it. Hook, I thought we were just running for our lives. I didn't know we had just started a war. The curse of the planet. The air inside the underground passage was thick with dust and silence. Jake leaned against the rough stone wall, his breathing heavy. His muscles ached, his head throbbed, and his mind reeled from what had just happened. The Punishers were still outside, waiting, hunting. He could feel their presence like a storm just beyond the horizon. Beside him, the alien sat with its knees drawn up, staring at its own hands. The strange glowing symbols on its skin pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. They had been weak before, flickering on the edge of death. But now, they were brighter. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. What happened back there? The alien didn't answer right away. Its thin fingers traced the glowing patterns, as if touching something it had long forgotten. They should have taken us, it murmured. They always take those who show kindness. Jake frowned. Yeah, well, I don't go down that easy. The alien lifted its head. Its deep, hollow eyes studied him like he was something strange, something impossible. You don't understand, it said softly. No one has ever fought back. Jake scoffed. That can't be true. If your people built all this, he gestured at the ancient stone walls around them. Then they must have fought them before. The alien shook its head. No, my people didn't fight them. We created them. Jake stiffened. What? The alien closed its eyes. For a long moment, it didn't speak, as if the weight of its own words was too much to bear. Then, slowly, it began. A long time ago, My kind ruled this planet. We were powerful, proud. We believed we were above all things, above weakness, above suffering, above kindness. We thought emotions made us lesser. Its voice grew heavier, filled with something dark. Regret. We wanted to be stronger, so we tried to erase our own weaknesses. We created beings that could remove them. That could take emotions from us, strip them away like disease. Jake's stomach twisted. Let me guess, that didn't go well. The alien let out a breath that sounded almost like a bitter laugh. At first, it worked. We became fearless, unbreakable. But the Punishers, they did not stop. Its fingers clenched. They didn't just erase weakness. They began to erase anyone who still felt. Jake swallowed hard. So, they turned against you. The alien nodded. One by one, our people change. Those who still felt kindness, hope, love, they were hunted, devoured, unmade. The rest of us, we let it happen. We thought we were becoming stronger. It looked down at its hands again, the glowing symbols casting strange shadows on the walls. By the time we realized the truth, it was too late. We had not become stronger. We had become nothing. Jake exhaled slowly, his mind racing. So what happened? How did you survive? The alien's expression darkened. I didn't. I should not be here. Jake blinked. What do you mean? The alien hesitated. Then it reached for the ground beneath them. Its fingers pressed against the stone, and suddenly, the symbols on its skin spread like cracks across the floor. Jake flinched as the cave trembled. The walls seemed to shift, moving like liquid stone. Then, suddenly, the cave remembered. Images exploded across the walls. Ghostly figures, towering structures, a civilization that once stood strong and proud. Jake saw beings like the alien, walking in golden streets, their bodies glowing with the same strange symbols. Then the images changed. The Punishers came. Dark, shifting forms descended from the sky. Cities collapsed. The golden light died. The alien figures fell, their bodies dissolving into nothing, as if they had never existed at all. Jake clenched his fists. They wiped out your whole species. The alien's voice was quiet. Not all at once. The images continued, flashing faster, darker, more desperate. A small group of aliens huddled together in the ruins, their symbols fading. Some tried to fight. Some tried to run. But one stood apart. Jake saw a familiar face, the alien beside him. You. Jake's eyes widened. You were there. The alien stared at the shifting images. I was the last. Jake turned back to the wall. In the vision, the Punishers surrounded the last survivor. But instead of running, instead of begging, the alien did something different. It knelt. The glowing symbols faded from its skin, willingly. Jake's breath caught. You. I gave it up, the alien whispered. My kindness, my hope, my emotions, I let them take it all. The vision ended. The cave stilled. The glowing cracks in the stone faded. Jake's mind reeled. The alien had survived because it had chosen emptiness over death. But you still feel, Jake said carefully. I saw you cry. I saw you afraid. I saw you. I should not, the alien cut in. It looked down at its hands, its face twisted in something close to horror. When you gave me your food, something broke. The kindness, the feeling, the weakness I cast away. It came back. Jake ran a hand through his hair. So what does that mean? The alien met his eyes. It means the Punishers will never stop hunting me now. The words hung heavy between them. Outside, the ground trembled again. The Punishers were moving, and this time they would not stop until they erased every last trace of kindness from this world, including Jake. Okay. I thought I was fighting monsters. I didn't know I was fighting an entire planet's curse. The sacrifice. The air inside the underground chamber was growing colder. Not the kind of cold that came with nightfall or deep caves. This was something unnatural, a cold that seeped into the bones, into the mind, into the soul. Jake felt it curling around him like invisible chains, wrapping tighter with each second. The Punishers were near. The alien sat beside him, staring at its hands. The glowing symbols pulsed, brighter than before, casting strange flickering light against the stone walls. It had been silent for a long time. Too long. Jake nudged it. "Hey, talk to me." The alien didn't lift its head. Its voice was flat, empty. "There is nothing to say." Jake clenched his jaw. "Like hell there isn't. The creatures outside. They're coming because of you." "Because you?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because you changed." The alien slowly lifted its head, hollow eyes searching his face. "I should not have," it murmured. Jake exhaled sharply. "Right. Well, it happened. And now we have a problem. So unless you've got some miracle trick up your sleeve, we need a plan. Fast." The alien looked at the glowing symbols on its arms again. "There is one way." Jake stilled. Something about the way it said that sent a shiver down his spine. "What way?" The alien lifted its hand. The symbols shifted, forming new patterns, ancient and unreadable. The cave trembled slightly as if the stone itself recognized the change. "I can stop them," the alien said quietly, "but it will cost me everything." Jake narrowed his eyes. "What does that mean?" The alien's gaze turned toward the ceiling, toward the shifting shadows above. The Punishers were moving, circling like vultures, waiting for them to break. "When you gave me food, you didn't just give me kindness," it murmured. "You gave me something else." Jake frowned. "What?" The alien turned back to him. "Choice." The weight of the word settled deep in Jake's chest. "For centuries, I was nothing. Just a hollow shell, surviving, hiding. But now I can choose." The alien's voice grew steadier, as if saying the words made them real. "And I choose to end this." Jake shook his head. "Hold on. You're talking like..." He stopped. Realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "No way. Whatever you're thinking, forget it." The alien's expression was unreadable. "There is no other way." Jake shot to his feet. "There's always another way." A deep, shuddering scream echoed through the tunnels. The stone walls trembled. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The Punishers were coming. The alien slowly rose to its feet, its frail body straightening. The glowing symbols began to spread, crawling up its arms, its neck, its face. Jake's pulse pounded. "Don't do this." The alien gave a small, almost sad smile. "You are different, Jake." Jake clenched his fists. "Then let's fight them together." The alien shook its head. "That is not how this ends." The walls shook violently. A deep, hollow howl filled the chamber. The shadows began slipping through the cracks, reaching, twisting. The alien stepped forward. The symbols on its skin blazed like fire. The stone floor lit up beneath its feet, forming a massive, pulsing pattern, a final act of defiance against the darkness. Jake took a step forward. "No." But the alien lifted a hand. A force like a strong wind pushed Jake backward, pinning him against the wall. "I was the last of my kind," the alien said softly. "I will be the last sacrifice." The shadows rushed forward, screaming. And the alien met them head-on. The room exploded in blinding golden light. The Punishers shrieked, a horrible, unnatural sound as their darkness collided with something stronger. The glowing symbols on the alien's skin burned brighter than the sun, expanding outward in waves. The darkness fought back, twisting, writhing, trying to consume the light. But it was too late. The alien's body began to dissolve, its form breaking apart like embers in the wind. Jake struggled against the invisible force holding him back. "No." The alien turned toward him one last time, Its body was fading, but its eyes, those deep, hollow eyes, held something new. Peace. Thank you. Then, in a flash of blinding white, it was gone. The cave shook violently, cracks splitting through the stone. The Punishers wailed, their forms twisting, breaking apart as the energy ripped through them. Then, silence. Jake gasped as the force holding him vanished. He stumbled forward, falling to his knees. The cave was still. The glowing symbols were gone. The alien was gone. For a long moment, Jake just sat there, staring at the empty space where it had stood. Outside, the sky had changed. The swirling black clouds had broken apart, revealing faint, distant stars. The air felt lighter, no longer filled with the oppressive weight of unseen terror. The Punishers were gone. The curse was gone. But so was the one who had lifted it. Jake's hands curled into fists. His chest ached, not from exhaustion, not from pain, but from something deeper. Something he didn't have words for. Finally, he rose to his feet. He took one last look at the cave, at the empty space where his companion had stood. Then he turned and walked away. Hilk, I came to this planet looking for supplies. I left with something far greater, and something I could never replace. The ultimate gamble. The wind outside the cave had changed. It no longer carried the weight of whispers, the heavy presence of unseen hunters. The Punishers were gone, but so was the alien. Jake stood motionless at the mouth of the cave, staring at the cracked ground where his companion had made the ultimate sacrifice. The glowing symbols were gone, their light burned out forever. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. He had seen death before, too many times, in too many places. But this was different. This time, it wasn't just about survival. This time, it was about choice. The alien had chosen to give everything. It had broken the chains of its past, defied the fate carved into its bones. It had chosen to be more. And now, it was gone. Jake swallowed hard, shoving his emotions deep down where they couldn't distract him. Not yet. He still had a job to do. Because something was wrong. The sky had cleared, the air was lighter, but Jake could feel it. A disturbance beneath his feet, a quiet tremor in the land itself. The fight wasn't over. Something else had woken up. Jake tapped the side of his helmet, pulling up his scanner. Numbers flickered across the screen. Unstable energy signatures, massive power fluctuations, and all of it was coming from deep beneath the planet's surface. Jake muttered a curse. Great, just great. The alien sacrifice had broken the Punishers, but it had also shaken something loose. Something that had been waiting. A low, distant rumble rolled across the land. It wasn't the sound of storms or shifting rock. It was the sound of something stirring. Jake's stomach twisted. Yeah, that's not good. A sharp beep echoed in his helmet. His ship's AI had picked up the same thing. A massive energy source, rapidly growing. Jake exhaled sharply. All right, time to go. But as he turned, the ground beneath him cracked. And then, the planet screamed. A deep, bone-rattling howl surged up from the earth, shaking the ruins to their core. Jagged fissures split through the land, glowing with an eerie golden light. Jake stumbled back, shielding his eyes as the air crackled with static. Then, from the depths of the planet, something rose. It was not like the Punishers. It was bigger, older, angrier. A massive, pulsating form of shifting stone and light emerged from the cracks, towering into the sky. Its body was not flesh, not smoke. It was part of the planet itself, shaped by rage, by pain, by centuries of trapped power. Jake felt his breath hitch. The planet had been cursed for too long. Now it was fighting back, and it had chosen him as its final enemy. Jake's mind raced. He had nothing left. No weapons strong enough. No plan, no backup. And yet, the alien had given him something. Not just kindness. Not just a second chance. Its power. Jake looked down at his own hands. Faint, almost invisible glowing marks were etched into his skin. His heart pounded. He hadn't noticed before, but now he understood. When the alien had touched him, when it had transferred the last of its strength, it had left something behind. A gift. Or a gamble. Jake flexed his fingers. The power was still there, waiting to be used. But he didn't know how. The massive form above him let out another earth-shaking roar, sending a shockwave of energy across the ruins. Jake braced himself, his mind working fast. The alien had said something before it disappeared. "You gave me choice." Jake exhaled. His hands burned with unseen energy. His body felt light, weightless. The planet's rage wanted destruction. But that wasn't his choice. That wasn't how this ended. Jake closed his eyes, and he made a different choice. The moment his decision settled, the marks on his skin ignited. Golden light flared around him, crackling with untamed energy. The planet screamed again, sensing the shift. Jake lifted his hands, and for the first time, he didn't resist the power. He let it flow through him, let it merge with his very being. Then he spoke. Not with words, not with force, but with understanding. The ground stilled. The light dimmed. The massive form above him hesitated, its rage flickering like a dying ember. Because for the first time in centuries, someone had listened. Jake stepped forward, his voice steady. "It's over." The planet trembled, resisting, unwilling to let go of its anger. But Jake stood his ground. "You don't have to fight anymore." Silence. The energy in the air shifted, not with violence, but with something softer, something more fragile. Acceptance. The ground cracked one final time, and the massive form of stone and light collapsed inward, dissolving into golden dust. The sky cleared, the wind softened, and the planet breathed. Jake let out a long, shaky breath. His hands still burned with lingering energy, but the battle was over. He had won. Not with war, not with violence, but with choice, with kindness. He looked up at the sky, at the stars that now shone freely above, and in the quiet hum of the restored world, he swore he heard a voice. "Thank you. Heokuk. I thought I had come to this planet alone. I thought I would leave it the same way. But kindness has a way of changing everything, even the fate of a world. A new beginning." The silence felt different now, not the heavy, suffocating quiet of death and despair. This was something else, a silence that carried relief. Jake stood in the ruins, breathing in the still air. The planet had stopped screaming. The sky, once choked by swirling black clouds, was now clear, revealing a vast expanse of stars above him. It was over. The punishers were gone. The curse that had bound this place in endless suffering had finally lifted. But at what cost? Jake looked down at his hands. The faint glowing marks were still there, etched into his skin like whispers of something long forgotten. He flexed his fingers, half expecting the energy to crackle to life again. But it didn't. It was fading. The power the alien had given him, the last remnants of its strength, was leaving. Jake exhaled slowly. It didn't matter. The mission was done. But why didn't it feel like a victory? His gaze drifted back toward the empty space where the alien had stood. The sacrifice had saved the planet. It had ended the cycle of destruction. But now the only one who had remembered, who had suffered, who had fought to change it, was gone. Jake ran a hand through his hair, his chest tightening. It wasn't fair. The alien had survived centuries of loneliness, of fear, of running. And the moment it had found a second chance, the moment it had finally felt something real again, it was taken away. Jake clenched his fists. Maybe the universe really was cruel. But then, a soft wind stirred around him. The air hummed gently, almost like a whisper. Jake frowned. Something had changed. The ruins, once dull and lifeless, now glowed faintly, as if the very stone was awakening after a long slumber. Tiny veins of golden light pulsed beneath the cracked ground. The planet was healing. Jake took a slow step forward. Something moved in the distance. He turned sharply, heart pounding. But it wasn't a threat. It was life. The dry, cracked earth that had once stretched endlessly in all directions was no longer empty. Small patches of green had begun to sprout from the soil, delicate and uncertain. Plants. Real, living plants. Jake let out a breath, barely able to process what he was seeing. The alien sacrifice hadn't just stopped the Punishers. It had done more than that. It had brought life back. A warm breeze brushed against Jake's skin. The wind carried a sound, not quite a voice, not quite words, but something familiar, a feeling. Jake closed his eyes, listening. And in the quiet hum of this reborn world, he understood. The alien wasn't gone. Not completely. It was part of this place now, woven into the very fabric of the planet, into the air, the ground, the stars above. It had become something more. Jake let out a breath, a small, tired smile tugging at his lips. "You stubborn idiot," he muttered. He stood there for a long time, just feeling. Then finally, he turned toward the sky, toward his ship waiting in orbit. It was time to go. But as he walked away, he made a silent promise. He wouldn't forget. Not the alien, not the sacrifice, not the lesson he had learned in the ruins of a dead world that had found life again. Because kindness wasn't weakness. It was the strongest force in the universe. And if it could save an entire planet, then maybe, just maybe, it could save the rest of the galaxy too. Look, I came here searching for supplies. I left with something far greater. A truth that would change me forever.